Let's talk about rock bottom. I've been there a time or two. No, I've never gone hungry, never been broke or out on the streets or out of work. I don't know that struggle, and I don't want to be quite honest. But emotionally, yeah, I've gone to some dark places. When you battle with mental illness, like so many do, there are so many low moments. So many times when you feel like life will never be joyful again. It's hard for me to pinpoint a particular time and say, yes, that was the one definitive rock bottom of my life. But one thing I can say is that the drink never helped. That's for sure. All of the times that I got sick and threw up, or had a drunken temper tantrum, or said something I shouldn't have, or did something reckless and dangerous, they would inevitably be followed by a week or so of depression and regret. It's almost too much to wrap one's mind around. So many unnecessary low moments, fanning the flames of depression and anxiety, triggered by my alcohol consumption. One of the last straws in my alcohol saga, however, the one that nearly broke the camel's back, happened a few months before I decided enough was enough. Welcome to Stone Cold Moderation, a thinking man's journey toward a healthier relationship with alcohol. I'm your host, Chase Lee. Let's continue with our story. Last summer, I went back east to visit some friends. The first weekend was 4th of July, and my buddy Jerry took me up to rural Vermont to one of his friends' places. Gorgeous property, incredible weather. And, as any self-respecting American does on 4th of July, I drank all goddamn day. And it was a great time. I met a bunch of his college friends, jumped in the pond every hour on the hour, helped cut down a tree with a chainsaw, real country shit. And at night we drank by the campfire as I downed one Jack and Coke after another. At some point I got to that special place, I think I had one too many place. Dizzy, wobbling, seeing double. My dinner started to come up, so I stumbled downstairs to the basement and, upon realizing there was in fact no bathroom down there, I threw up under the stairs. Well done. I vividly remembered this part. Everything after that is a bit of a blur, but I know that I successfully pulled off the old boot and rally because I was up for another few hours. And at some point in the wee hours of the morning, I made it to my air mattress and blanket, which had been graciously provided for me by our host, laid out in the same basement I had just thrown up in that very night. When I woke up the next morning, I was immediately crushed by that familiar hangover headache. You know, a sharp, splitting pain in the front of your forehead, accompanied by weak and brittle limbs, and a disgusting taste in your mouth. Normal morning after stuff, but something else wasn't quite right. Somehow you always know, but for a few moments you're in denial. No fucking way, you tell yourself. Please let this be a dream. But it was no dream, just wetness. Everywhere. Soaked through my pants, my shirt, the blanket, and the mattress. This amount of fluid could only mean that I had urinated multiple times during the night. This was not the first time I had drunkenly wet the bed, but never like this. I mean, my God, even the floor underneath the mattress was wet. How was that even possible? In a panic, I managed to stealthily get up, chuck my mattress and blanket outside the house, change into my bathing suit, and hang up my piss-soaked garments to dry in the woods. Luckily, I had woken up before anyone else, so my movements went undetected. And then, instead of a shower, I went and jumped in the pond. For a moment, swimming in the pond on that gorgeous morning served to delay the impending anxiety and shame. But then I realized that I should probably tell my host about what I'd done. It was his stuff I'd peed on after all. And I couldn't believe that as a 27-year-old, full-grown adult, I was going to have to apologize for pissing the bed. This might have been funny 5 years ago as a college senior, but I could find a little humor in it now. After breakfast, I mustered up the courage to come clean and inform our host about my little accident. And he was very gracious. People have done much worse on this property, he assured me. I laughed it off and I said it wouldn't happen again. We cleaned and disinfected everything, and that was that. But needless to say, I was embarrassed. And I didn't tell him about the vomit I had left underneath the basement stairs. That would have been too much for me. So, after all that, what did I decide to do? You guessed it. Drink all goddamn day again. And it was another great day. A second tree was chopped down, a few games of touch football took place, and the pond was frequented the whole afternoon. And that night, again, I accelerated. I don't remember much after the sun went down, but I do remember that I was the last man standing, drinking alone on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. At some point again, I managed to stumble back to bed. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I was headache-free. Whew, this will be a better morning, I thought to myself. But wait, why are my pants wet again? Did I jump into the pond late last night? Did it rain or something? There is no way. 2 days in a row? Impossible, I thought. I didn't get sick. I remember being the last person left on the porch. I was a lot less drunk than the night before, wasn't I? But alas, I had done it again. Soaked through my pants, my second blanket, the poor mattress. I looked around the room as the sun streamed in through the window. I probably only had a few minutes before the others would arise, so, for the second time in as many days, I secretly cleaned up the mess, changed clothes, threw away the pants I was wearing, and went back to the porch to nurse my wounds. As I laid there, I wanted to disintegrate into 1,000 pieces and disappear into the wind. I was pathetic and weak, and I could only blame myself. Mercifully, an hour or two later, my buddy Jerry came looking for me, and we started to pack the car for the journey back to New York City. This time, I didn't tell our host about my little accident. I was too ashamed. In the car on the way back, Jerry dropped a bomb on me. Yeah, so yesterday I actually didn't drink, he said. What do you mean you didn't drink? I retorted. I was just sober the whole day, he added. I couldn't conceive of the idea. Just not drinking? How does one simply not drink? So why didn't you want to drink? I continued. I just didn't feel great from the first night, and I'm really close with everyone in that group, so I didn't feel like I needed it yesterday. I was floored. This was revolutionary. Is this the first time you've done that? I inquired. No, I mean, I take some days and nights off every so often, he answered. The rest of the ride home, I pondered this revelation in silence. It made perfect sense. By drinking like a crazy person, I nearly ruined what would have otherwise been an amazing weekend. But could I simply not drink? Was I even capable of such a feat? Whew, yeah. What a story, right? Man, I can't imagine being, I don't know, like a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old and kind of, I guess, imagining yourself at an older age, like being 27 and thinking, wow, at that age, I'm going to be, so drunk that I'm gonna piss the bed 2 nights in a row on a certain occasion. I don't know. I guess you just looking in the future, you expect yourself to be more mature and you expect yourself to be more adept at living in the world than that. So yeah, I mean that story that I told you was one of my last straws. Wasn't the last time I got drunk, but it was one of the last times I got drunk. There's a couple of other times after that, but it was really the I think the moment in which the strongest moment, the most shocking moment to me in which I was like, okay, I don't think I might need to make a change because this is just ridiculous. Um, yeah, I mean, it was shocking to me that that happened on two straight occasions, and it was bad. It was embarrassing, and again, um, I was also blacking out that entire trip. Parts of it I didn't remember, and that I wanted to remember because it was actually a really good weekend. But I was drunk off my ass and consequences. So when my friend Jerry basically told me, "Oh yeah," like I very casually, "Oh yeah, I didn't drink on Saturday. I didn't drink the second day." I was floored. I really had not I really had not heard of somebody just deciding not to drink it just because. We've all been in a situation where you don't drink because you're sick or because you're on antibiotics. That's a classic one. Or because you're DDing, right? So we've all of us have successfully been sober, but always for a reason, I feel. Or because I don't know, you had like a test the next day or something, right? There was like some reason. But for me it was honestly revolutionary. It was a revelation to hear somebody say, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to drink just because." Right? Just because I don't want to. I don't know. Maybe I'm maybe maybe I've been hanging out with like the wrong people my entire life, but it was just very very fascinating for me, this idea. Um yeah, for me, I had known this before, of course, but this was just a clear example. If I'm going to drink, there's going to be clear negative consequences to my actions. Okay. Obviously, on not every occasion that I drank, I would do something like this. It didn't always end badly. There was times when I was drunk and then the event or whatever, the occasion went perfectly normal, right? Nothing bad happened. Sometimes, you have great times when you're drunk and only good things happen. But sometimes terrible things happen, right? And unnecessarily, I would feel. But for me, I think unavoidable, inevitable with my drinking was always the emotional toll that it would take on me, the emotional pitfalls of drinking. Even if I had had a great time while I was drunk, the next day, I'm not going to be myself. I'm not going to be 100%. I'm probably going to go through a little period of feeling depressed, feeling anxious, shame. Even if I had had an amazing time, I, that could be just me because I'm more susceptible to periods of depression than maybe, I guess, your average person, right? But I feel like many, many people out there have a similar response similarly to alcohol. Okay. And we're going to talk about that right now, actually. Um, Alcohol's effect on one's mood. I'm going to talk about a book that I highly recommend, and I will leave the information for that in the show notes of this episode. It's called Responsible Drinking. It's by Frederick Rogers. I think I'm pronouncing it Rogers, Rotgers. Okay, Frederick Rogers. It's basically a book about moderation drinking. and very interesting ideas. On page 16 of the ebook, he talks about a study from two psychologists, I presume, Cowan and Lawrence, from 1999. It's called The Role of Opioid Dopamine Interactions in the Induction and Maintenance of Ethanol Consumption. Wow. This study was published by the Progress in Psychopharmacology and Biological Psychiatry. Wow, that is a mouthful. And that is why that's why I don't have a PhD. But anyways, this study basically talks about the 4 reward centers of the brain, also known as the 4 F's, reward centers in the brain: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and fucking. Essentially, if in our lives we satisfy one of these reward centers, we feel pleasure. Okay? So, yeah, feeding, if you have a great meal, you feel great. After you have sex, hopefully you feel great. Fighting and fleeing, those are the other ones. You can think of a million examples. We've all experienced this. They affect the dopamine levels in your brain and the neurotransmitters, and you feel actual pleasure. Also, furthermore, when you drink alcohol, these reward centers of our brain are affected, which explains why when you drink alcohol, you feel pleasure, right? After the first, second, third, fourth drink, we've all experienced this. You feel good, free of your inhibitions. Basically, the alcohol is changing your brain chemistry to convince your brain that it's actually experienced some sort of triumph, right? Again, satisfying, engaging one of these reward centers in your brain. But that doesn't last, does it? No, you come down. On page 17 of Responsible Drinking, again by Frederick Rogers, page 17 of the ebook, he cites another study done by Richard Solomon. It's called The Opponent Process Theory of Acquired Motivation, the Cost of Pleasure, and the Benefits of Pain. This is from the year 1980. It was published by a journal called The American Psychologist. It talks about the opponent process, okay, which basically, the opponent process theory, which essentially says that our brains have a counterbalancing system to bring emotional levels back to neutral after experiencing an extreme emotion. Okay, so this could be an extreme positive emotion or an extreme negative emotion. For example, I don't know, your dog dies, right? That's an emotional extreme. That's a low. Eventually, you're gonna start to feel better whether it be after a couple days, a couple weeks. Your mind and your emotions are going to recover. Same thing is if you have an emotional high, you win the lottery, God forbid, something like that, an emotional high. Eventually, you're going to start to feel like normal again, like yourself. You're not always going to stay at that high, or you're not always going to stay at that low. As it relates to alcohol, sometimes the brain overcompensates. Okay, which can explain the low that you feel after you binge drink, after you drink a lot, or depending on who you are, after you drink a little bit. Drinking will create this emotional high, okay? And eventually your brain is going to come back to neutral. But according to this study by Richard Solomon, sometimes your mind is going to overcompensate, and it's going to swing you to the other side, right? So you're drinking, you're feeling great, you're feeling amazing. We've all experienced this. We've all had this many times. Everyone who's drinking knows this. It's the come down, right? You're drinking, you're feeling great. You come down, the next day you feel like shit. That is the hangover, okay? Your brain has overcompensated, you've swung in the wrong direction, and now you feel like shit. For me, if I get really drunk, I'm going to feel like shit for about a week. So the point is, it's difficult after we drink to not feel shame, to not feel depression, and to not bottom out emotionally, because actually there's a chemical process happening in our brain making that happen. Surprise, right? That's what's happening in our brains. These are the immediate negative consequences of drinking, along with all of the other stupid shit that you might be susceptible to doing while drunk. Makes you question, why are we getting drunk, right? Why are we binge drinking? Why are we doing this to ourselves? All right, so we have my friend Jerry here with us this afternoon. This is the same friend from the story that I was just illustrating for you guys. The very same friend who took me to Vermont. So he saw everything. A little bit of background: we have been friends for over a decade, right? My math, more than that, for a long time.
2 decades.
Two decades? Yeah, almost 2 decades. There you go. And we have done a fair amount of drinking together, probably not as much as with my college buddies, but we've done some drinking together. Yeah. So Jared, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick? What do you do? Where are you?
Yeah, for sure. Jeremiah, or Jerry, as Chase knows me. We have been friends since second grade, which I think puts us at about 20 years
There you go.
on the dot. Yeah, I'm in New York. I'm in New York State, quarantined like everyone else. I work in the food industry. We sell food to offices, so we're not working very much right now, but hoping everyone else is staying safe.
So basically, as you recall, that weekend, that special weekend for me in Vermont, which was a great weekend, I was blacked out. I pissed the bed twice, right? Back-to-back nights. You, however, on Saturday, just decided to not drink. So at the time, that was like very kind of shocking and very like kind of like a revelation for me, right? Do you still, on occasion, just decide not to drink when you're in a social occasion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think last summer I played with like limiting the number of drinks I would have in a week. So I would say I would have only like, 8 or 10 drinks in a week. And if I hit that number by Thursday, I wouldn't drink all weekend. And that was my first foray into like trying to control alcohol. And then more recently, I had a concussion. So I've been like medically, it's very inadvisable for me to drink. So all of my socializing has happened in the context of not being able to consume alcohol.
Why did you, before this concussion, why did you start? What was the motivation for starting to cut back?
I just like had noticed it's more of like a health impact of it. Not like, I mean, I obviously felt very hungover when I would drink. Like my body just doesn't metabolize alcohol well. But also like you just think about like how many calories you consume, and you just feel terrible often. I felt at least. And so I was kind of curious, just to explore what it would look like if I drank less, and you know just see if my life would change at all or how I'd feel. And it was, yeah, I mean, well, I'm sure we'll talk through how that went.
Gotcha. To add some more context, Jerry is 7 feet tall and a former pro basketball player and also a vegetarian. So he definitely has a very strange metabolism, which has been the topic of many discussions in our
Yeah,
time.
6'10", not 7 feet, but yeah.
All right.
There,
Well,
sure.
I was trying to do you a solid there, but okay. That's cool. How has the cutting back benefited your life since you've started to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think last summer I had a lot of different like observations. Um, One, I mean, I guess like the highest level one is that it really like the difference between hanging out with friends all day and drinking, not drinking is so little. And I was obviously expecting it to be more. So I remember I had a weekend, like a different weekend when I was with you, Chase, where I was up in the countryside with friends. I didn't drink the entire weekend, and not a single person even like knew I wasn't drinking. And it was just like it didn't even wasn't even a question, wasn't even a factor, because it's just so not necessarily tied to how people perceive you. And then in terms of how I actually felt internally, I actually had like I'm such an extroverted person that I noticed that when I cut out alcohol, I got more energy. So I would like actually get like more excited and more engaged in conversations versus less. 'Cause I think alcohol was like kind of dumbs you down a little bit. And so I was kind of pleasantly surprised by understanding like what it's like to be in a really vibrant social situation without alcohol.
Yes, I've also had the same experience. It's actually very surprisingly exhilarating to be sober in a bar or a club or a party and just kind of there. It's even actually for me right now. It's like more exciting than being drunk. That's not exciting for me anymore. So I totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Um,
there's like, I mean, if you're in a big space with a lot of people, like there's a lot of adrenaline, like there's a lot of energy, and that I feel like alcohol can often mute that. And then you obviously get to that point we've all been to where like you're drinking to stay awake, but then you're like so muted at that point. You're not really even aware of your surroundings, right?
Gotcha. So you live in New York right now, and you just to share with our audience, Jerry is the founder of a company called Slow Up, which we'll talk. Well, we can name drop later and give your social media and all that. But you're in the business world, and New York can be a very difficult place to be sober in, given all that it has to offer. So, how has being sober or cutting back the drinking been especially challenging for life in New York?
Yeah, I mean, New York is like a crazy place, right? I mean, I think like New York and Chicago and some of these massive cities are so organized around a drinking culture, and I like have never found it to be that extreme professionally. I know with like if you work for a really big business, it's very common that like Friday you get very intoxicated with your coworkers. But I do think there's enough of an awareness now that that's not necessarily something you have to do, and you can definitely still hang out with these people without drinking. And that's kind of like when I was working for a company. Now that I have my own company, I like find no implication in my life. Like even when I would have meetings over drinks, I found it to be like you know a time cost because then you couldn't do so much work after the meeting. So I actually almost canceled all of my like cocktail meetings even before I considered not drinking as much. If that makes sense.
Gotcha. Do you have any advice for people who are considering cutting back or stopping drinking but are scared to do so for all of the reasons that we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think like just start like very simple. Like I find that whenever I do any sort of exercise in restraint, that I learn much more about restraint than the actual thing I'm doing. So whether it's like sugar or not eating dessert or drinking less alcohol or making sure you exercise more,
Yeah,
I would just set like a very clear goal and not set too many goals. Like you don't have to say I'm never going to drink
right.
for the rest of my life. You could say for the next month I'm going to have 3 drinks a week and see where that goes. I mean, the one thing we haven't talked about that I do think is a bit of an interesting question is dating when it
Mm.
comes to drinking less.
Let's talk about that.
Um, yeah, I mean, like New York City is a huge dating culture. Like I'm mostly in my late 20s. It's a part of my life. Um, I do think there is expectation. A lot of people feel like very strongly that, they have to have a drink on a date. Um, but my roommate and one of my best friends is sober, and he's like had a very, active dating life, and he hasn't found anyone has ever said anything about it. And I've had the same experience where I've gone on dates with multiple people who are sober, and like I'll get a beer, and they'll get whatever they get, and like it's totally fine. So I do think it's much more like a stigma than anything I've ever actually seen play out in the real world.
Gotcha. You haven't had to kind of change your social circle, or I guess like make new friends over alcohol.
No, no, nothing like that. I mean, even like I was living in Chicago a few years ago in like a friend group that was heavily, heavily oriented around alcohol, and I didn't like. I remember we had a big weekend in Wisconsin later last year, late last year, sorry. Um, and the second day, I think I did the same thing that I did with you, Chase, when I was in Vermont, where I just didn't drink at all because like I didn't feel good from the first day, and not a single person said a thing. And that's like one of the most quote unquote broiest friend groups you could imagine, right?
Yes. Yes, I. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen
Well, people
worse,
just
but yeah.
like I mean, people want to hang out with you. People want to have fun.
Yeah.
Like people don't care if you're drinking a Lacroix or Miller Lite. Um, and people want you to be like, healthy, right? So if you drink too much and you become not fun to be around, or you feel terrible the next day, then you don't get to hang out with your friends as much. Like there's a lot of like there's all different ways to think about it, right?
Right. So going back to that weekend, just out of personal curiosity, what did you like observe from me? Because you knew that I had pissed the bed the first night and that I was extremely inebriated the whole time, and I was having a really good time. But were you like concerned? Were you like what's going on, or did I just kind of seem normal to some extent?
No, I mean, I definitely could tell you were drinking too much. Um, I mean, you were in an environment where you didn't know anyone, and you were doing a really good job socializing with all sorts of people, and I had a ton of fun with you. But like, as the day would go on each day, it was being clear that you were like less there, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
yes.
Um, and it, you know, I haven't spent enough time with you to know if that was something where like it was a lack of ability to control it or not. But it definitely didn't seem like a good sustainable system if that's what's happening every weekend.
Right. Right. Yeah, because we haven't really. I guess you missed the whole college episode, which was extremely heavy drinking. But yeah, we haven't actually drank together in excess that many times because high school was like pretty light. I would say. Um, do you have any? Because the topic of this episode is consequences and shame and rock bottom. Do you have any terrible stories that you want to share with us of alcohol?
I mean, I think we all have done things in alcohol that we regret. I haven't had like any really bad moments in terms of like doing something that's like really, really bad. But I have a lot of friends that have gotten into like, legal challenges, relational challenges, ended relationships, or, done things they would never ever want to do because of alcohol. And so I do think that like there's a growing understanding of just how much the consequence can be. And I think the earlier people can start to control their alcohol consumption, or at least be, drink on their own terms versus just drink and with momentum with other people, um, the better they can actually understand those consequences and mitigate them. I mean, a lot of people need a moment where something really hits rock bottom to start thinking about that. I think that's what you've articulated. That's what a lot of my friends have articulated have gone sober. And I actually have three of my best friends. Of like I seven best friends have gone sober in the past 2 years, so it's pretty common.
Wow. Yeah.
But and I guess I don't know if are you technically sober now, or are you just like minute? What's your status?
Basically,
I'll do this fourth.
yeah, I mean, my rule is I call it the rule of three. You can see that on my website. But basically, if I'm going to drink in a day, I can't drink more than 3 drinks. And since I
Nice.
don't typically drink more than, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a month, for me, that's like perfectly sustainable. And there's a lot of times where I just go out and I just decide not to drink at all.
Yeah,
But it's like,
very cool.
yeah, it's drastically different from where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, you know.
Totally.
So
Yeah, and
it's
I'm
been good.
curious. I'm curious what you think, because like when I've done stuff like that, or it's like I'm gonna have 2 drinks tonight.
Yeah.
Like I almost like don't even like feel anything. So I'm like, oh, I didn't even need to do those 2 drinks. Or
Yeah.
like sometimes, or do you notice that you like having the drinks, and then you can like be like, what is the motive? What is the thought behind that?
I mean, for me, I thought about very deeply about just going sober completely, but then I thought about the future, right? Imagining if I'm on the beach somewhere and I want to have a beer, or like, I'm traveling and I'm having a nice dinner and I want to have a glass of wine. Like, I think I can still handle that.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I needed to cut it out completely, right?
Yep.
But so yeah, no, but I completely agree. Like sometimes you have those,
That makes
if
sense.
you like sometimes, yeah, if I have the 3 drinks, I'm kind of like, I didn't really need that, right?
Yeah.
But and that's good. So that's why a lot of times I found myself just going out and going to a bar and not drinking at all. And I feel like I'm like on this like downward trend where I'm drinking less and less and less and less. So um
Yeah. Actually, I do have a story that I think does actually kind of help explain why I course corrected my own drinking. Now that I'm thinking about it.
go for it.
Um, no, so I was living in India 2 years ago, um, and like for a project, I used to be a consultant, and there was one night where we went out and like I just like almost like wanted to see how much I could drink. Like I'm not the type of person that can black out, but like I definitely get sick. And it was a night that I ended up like throwing up a ton all over my hotel room and like just feeling, absolutely terrible for like 2 days after. Um, and I mean, since that night, I've never gotten close to that level of drunk or just like the idea of just like not feeling some limitation or like ability to control it. Because like I just don't never want to go back back there.
Yeah. So that was like maybe a turning point.
It was a turning point just seeing like what, yeah, I would say like that was a night when I was just like, you know what, like I'm just gonna drink as much as I want with no kind of like feedback loop or check in my mind. And I've never had a night like that since then because I just like, would never want to get to a point like that again.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel about the weekend in Vermont. Just like,
yeah,
I never, as like as a grown adult, you're just like, this is not what I need to be doing.
totally. Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt. Like I felt, someone had to clean up my vomit in my hotel room. Like that's horrible. Right. Like,
Yeah. I've been there before a time or two.
No, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I guess I just would correct it. That's like, I don't think I didn't have some bad moments. I think it's we all do.
So you've had this concussion and you've not drank for how many weeks now?
About 2 months.
Wow. So how has that been?
I mean, it's been, I think like there's the whole like, I'm not drinking because I choose not to. And then there's the whole like separate bucket, which would be like, it's really bad for me to drink medically, which I think gets kind of like a different rep. So I've found like dealing with the concussion is very challenging. But the not drinking part is so easy. Because like you're talking about like your brain health, right? And like I've been around a lot of people drinking. Like my friends have, if I have go to a dinner party or something, everyone's drinking. But it's like it's almost it's like very black and white when you're like injured like this,
When you recover, did you think your drinking will go back to where it was, or do you think you'll continue to kind of downward trend?
I will definitely downward trend. I mean, I think as a part of the concussion recovery process, I've had to cut out a lot of things in my life. Like, any sort of substances, like sugar, caffeine, and like I hope to add, like caffeine. I hope to have coffee again in my life once things have stabilized. Like I really like coffee. But yeah, I think like we're just learning so much about the negative health impacts of alcohol, and like forget about like you doing dumb stuff. Like it's just really not good for you to drink, to binge drink ever, to have more than 2 or 3 drinks in a night. And so I imagine that just even having one concussion is enough to make me really limit my alcohol for a very long time. And like to your point, Chase, like I would love to get to a point when if I'm, having a really nice meal in Italy, that I would have a glass of, nice wine. Like, sure, that would be great, but I'm not there yet,
Yeah, I hear you. All right, so that's all the questions I got for you. But just to wrap it up, do you want to just share with the audience your company, if they're in the East Coast, blah blah blah? Do you want to name drop yourself?
Yeah, for sure. No, first of all, this is such a privilege to be on your show. I'm very proud of all the thinking you're putting into this.
Thank you.
Having seen you in Vermont versus being a part of this conversation is like a pretty crazy turnaround in less than a year, right?
Yeah. It's been what, 8 months or something.
Yeah, super cool. And I've seen this across a lot of people in my life, and I think it's like very admirable. And I find almost everyone who does it gets lots of support. I think you probably agree with that too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I have my company is called Slow Up, SLOW space UP, slowup.co, or follow us on Instagram at Slow Up. We basically make light meal bars. So if you're on the go, don't have time to eat, or currently in this economy, if you're sick of cooking and you want fresh food, we've taken the ingredients of a grain bowl and make them fresh into a bar. So it's super convenient, healthy, and tastes much more like food than like a snack. So it's been an exciting journey, and then we ship to the Northeast. So check us out.
How can people find you? Social media?
Yeah, Slow Up at Slow Up on Instagram or slowup.co. Or me personally. Sorry.
Yeah, whatever, whatever you got.
That's Slow Up. That's fine.
All right, for sure. And I'll definitely share that information in the show notes of this show. especially for people who are in the Northeast. Yeah, man, thank you so much for being on the show. Very much appreciate it. Stay on the line so we can chat. But yeah, thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. So from that discussion with my buddy Jerry, just a little reflection. First of all, it's really interesting to kind of have these conversations with your friends. Um, some of the points that he made that I think to me were most impactful. He was talking about how when you are in an environment like you're going out, you're at a bar, you're at a club, there's so much adrenaline in the room already, and alcohol can sort of take you out of that, right? So the more you drink, the more you kind of distance yourself from the people you're around. And we think that we're kind of doing the opposite at times because alcohol is a social excuse me, a social lubricant, and it lowers your inhibitions and whatnot. But in fact, the drunker, especially when you start to get real drunk, the drunker and drunker you get, the more you're actually distancing yourself from people. Not the kind of social distancing that you want to do. Huh? Quarantine joke? Yeah? Like it? Nope. Okay. Moving on. It was impactful to me how when I asked him about how he viewed my behavior when we were in Vermont together, and he said that he noticed I was becoming less and less present, right? So yeah, like I was clearly having a good time, but as the day went on, he could see that I was starting to get drunker and drunker and drunker and starting to lose my ability to kind of like connect to people. And that was kind of that's pretty unfortunate, and that's kind of sad when you think about that. Um and also when he talked about how, like you're in those situations, like your friends just kind of they just want to be around you, so to speak. Um it kind of sometimes it doesn't matter if you're drinking or not. Like they just in a social situation, a lot of times people just want to be social, right? So as a response to peer pressure, which he said he isn't really experiencing, um, on the contrary, he said that he's received a lot of support from people, which I can definitely attest to. Everyone who I have spoken to, who I've told about my current project, about how I'm, moderating and not drinking hardly at all anymore, they've been extremely supportive. So don't underestimate your friends, right? Don't underestimate the people who you're around, because we have that fear that, oh, if I stop drinking, no one's going to want to hang out with me. I'm going to become super boring. They're going to ridicule me. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Give them a chance. Okay? Don't underestimate them. A lot of times people just want to be around you. They just want to be in your presence. They don't care if you're drinking or not. If again, if you do deal with peer pressure and you do face ridicule for this, that's a bigger problem, and that's something we're going to definitely talk about in a future episode, is kind of how to distance yourself from toxic people, so to speak. And just to do a little bit more promotion for him before we continue, his product is called Slow Up. It's like a nutrition bar, but it goes beyond that. It's more of a meal replacement bar. Super delicious, all natural ingredients. I had a bunch of them. I probably stole a bunch of them for free when I was at his apartment last summer. He had the flavors. He has got a bunch of different flavors. My favorites were the pesto. I'm not sure if he still has that. And he also has dessert flavors. He had like a chocolate, like a peanut butter. So really delicious, especially during these times. You might be in quarantine listening to this. You're getting tired of eating. Getting tired of eating. You're getting tired of cooking. He will ship to you, especially if you're in the Northeast. So I would definitely check him out. Wrapping up our discussion for today, alcohol and abusing alcohol has clear negative consequences that I think we've all experienced. Negative consequences in the short term and also in the long term. For me, definitely alcohol was a primary trigger of my mental health issues with feelings of shame, feelings of depression, regret, anxiety. Those two were completely intertwined. So cutting that out of my life, essentially cutting binge drinking out of my life, has really been freeing and liberating for me. And sometimes it takes bottoming out, hitting rock bottom to get there. For me, one of my rock bottoms was this experience in Vermont, when I realized I gotta make a change. This is not working for me. Maybe you've had some of those experiences. Maybe you will have some of those experiences. It's important to reflect on those experiences and say, it's time to do something. But being sober can be fun. Okay? These social situations, it's extremely eye-opening to be in them without alcohol. And I encourage you to try them, to give it a shot. Have faith in yourself. Believe, challenge yourself to be in these situations that you would normally be hammered in, and try to do it sober. It's actually extremely exhilarating, and you'll enjoy the connections that you have with people, and you'll enjoy to be in those situations and have your full mental capacity, have all of your mental faculties on full blast because you're sober, and your brain actually is working. You're not dumbed down at all. You're present in that moment, and it's extremely exhilarating. So that's my challenge for the week, actually. The challenge, for this episode. Challenge is at your next social event that you would normally drink at. Whether that be, I would say, going out with colleagues after work, or going to a party, going to a bar, going out on a weekend. This is obviously going to be tough for a lot of people right now, because if you're listening to this, I'm recording this episode on March the 28th, is it? I don't know, I've lost track. You may be in quarantine and you're not going out, okay? But I would still challenge you, if tonight, for example, is a night where you think, I was gonna drink a little bit, I was gonna Skype with my friends, I was gonna drink. Don't. Okay? Challenge yourself for this next drinking situation to not drink. Give it one shot. Okay? That's our challenge for this week. This has been the Stone Cold Moderation Podcast with Chase Lee. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out the show notes on the description page of this episode, or on stonecoldmoderation.com, where you can learn more about us. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and make sure to tune in next time. We'll be talking about why we drink.